Hi, this is Steve Rigolosi, and today's forgotten mystery is Death of a Fool by Ngaio Marsh. And this is copyright 1956 by Little Brown. And before we get started, can we just talk about this beautiful cover design? The way the type works together, the way the colors work together, art that clearly was created specifically for this book. We can even see the art of bookmaking on the spine here. You see a nice design that shows a publisher really putting some money into a book. We don't really see much of this anymore, and it's kind of sad, but at the same time understandable because profit margins are so razor thin and publishers really have to keep their costs down. But like I said, great cover design, and also a bit of ephemera that goes with the book. This was originally a review copy, and this is what was included with the review copy to the literary editor. And it says, this book will be published on October 17th, 1956 for the low price of $3.50. So it was kind of exciting to get my hands on a review copy from back in the day. And I noticed that a previous owner, I suspect there was only one because the book is almost brand new. The previous owner underlined one word in the book, absurdities. And I thought, is this a commentary on how this reader felt about this book? I'll get into that later on if I remember. So a little bit about Ngaio Marsh. She is, I guess, considered one of sort of the big four of the women mystery writers from this era. The other three are, of course, Agatha Christie, Dorothy L, and Margery Allingham. And it's interesting how all four of those writers were completely different from each other. Each had her own style. I don't think anyone was ever nearly as big as Agatha. But, Ngaio Marsh was definitely in that group and very, very highly respected. So, reading this book, I was reminded that Ngaio Marsh was really of the theater. She was an actress and a director and a producer. She's a native New Zealander and ended up spending a lot of time in England. And I was actually kind of hoping that this book would be set in New Zealand. But only a minority of her books are set there. Most of them are set in England, including this one, which is too bad because I have this fascination with New Zealand and would like to know more about it. Full disclosure, I used to be the publisher of a geography list, and I love those books and love those authors. Hated the company, but love those books. And when I was doing those books, I learned about this phenomenon in New Zealand called the Roaring Forties, which has to do with 40 degrees latitude, and they're very, very heavy winds. And I always thought, oh, that would be such a cool place to go, to be in a place where it's so windy that you actually feel like you might lift off the ground and achieve flight. So maybe I'll get there someday. Who's to say? It's supposed to be a beautiful and wonderful place. But I'm getting off topic, as I sometimes do. So in addition to being of the theater, Ngaio Marsh was also an artist. So truly a woman of many, many talents. And I had not read a Marsh book in probably 20 years. And I was reminded when this book started about other books of hers that I've read that have a theater setting, as this one does. And this theater setting is actually It's sort of takes place, like I said, in England. And it's basically a play from pagan times that is enacted every year ritually in this tiny village in England, and it's sort of run by this family that's been in the village for 400 years, and so sort of a mumming play, very ritualistic. Only certain people are privy to the language, and so it's got sort of that very interesting literary anthropological approach, which you don't see very much. And the death of the fool of the title is the man, I'm not giving anything away here, the man who plays the fool in this play is the victim of a murder. In fact, a fun fact here is that the original title when it was published was Off with His Head, which explains to you how the murder happened. I like that title better than Death of a Fool, although Death of a Fool works. I just think Off with His Head is more fun and violent, which is ironic because Ngaio Marsh is not at all a violent writer. She's so refined and so genteel in a way. And she can really sometimes stop you in her tracks with her writing. And I just want to give you, for those who have not read Ngaio Marsh in the past, who have never read her, I want to give you just a little bit of a sample of her writing to give you a sense of just what she could do. So let me read you a paragraph here. As she advanced into the room, Allen seemed to see not so much a middle-aged German as the Let me start that again. As she advanced into the room, Allen seemed to see not so much a middle-aged German as the generalization of a species. Mrs. Bunz was the lady who sits near the front at lectures and always asks questions. She has an enthusiasm for obscure musicians, stands nearest to guides, keeps handicraft shops of the better class, and reads Rabindranath Tagore. She weaves, forms circles, gives talks, hand throws pots, and designs book plates. She is sometimes a vegetarian, though not always a crank. Occasionally, she is an expert. So, how's that for a paragraph that you just want to read multiple times? So, I really basically told you the plot of this book. A member of the acting troupe that performs this play is killed during a performance. No one sees it. And Ngaio Marsh's detective, Roderick Alleyn, and his men are called in to solve the case. And Roderick Alleyn is a good character. He has he's forceful and in charge, but he also knows how to sort of adjust his questioning to the person he is talking to. And he also has a really good sense of when to delegate things to the local police as opposed to the people from Scotland Yard, due to local sensitivities and all that kind of stuff. So Roderick Alleyn is cool and likable. I think this book is probably before he meets the woman who becomes his wife, Troy. Troy Alleyn, who is a painter, much like Ngaio Marsh herself, and is a great secondary character in the later books, but she doesn't make an appearance here. So here are my thoughts about this book. In reading it, I was reminded that Ngaio Marsh's pace is usually pretty leisurely. The pages don't fly by. They mostly maintain your interest, but leisurely is the best word that I can give. And It's sometimes bordering on dull. I mean, really, that's just the truth, I think, my opinion. I've seen this in a number of her books, that she often does not have a lot of action or other things that propel the plot other than the original crime that has to be investigated. So when you read this book, I think you read it for the pleasure of reading Ngaio's prose, and also some of her I don't want to say quirks, trademarks. Some of her trademarks is she was very, very attuned to snobbery, and that comes across in this book. She has that interesting outsider's perspective on snobbery of a New Zealander coming to England. And, having read many English novels, as I think probably a lot of us have done, to this day, I'm still amazed at how attuned to class English society is, to the point of people judging your class on every single aspect of your existence, from the books in your library, to the shoes on your feet, to the school you went to the way you pronounce a certain word, to where your parents live, to where your great-grandfather's profession. It's like there's a constant mental calculus going on there that is trying to put everybody into this place in a hierarchy. And often that entails trying to put oneself above that other person. So Marsh has some fun, I think, with playing with English snobbery. She also has a very good ear for local accents. So she sort of transliterates a lot of the dialogue into the local accent, which is close enough to regular spoken English that you can understand it. So I thought she handled that nicely. A negative comparison is, have you ever read Dorothy L. Sayers' The Five Red Herrings? Oh, excuse me. I probably should remake this video and edit out that sneeze, but I'm not going to. In that book, Dorothy L. Sayers writes such heavy, heavy dialect. You can't understand a goddamn thing anybody's saying. And the whole book is about railroad schedules. I mean, we're used to worshiping Dorothy L. Sayers for her excellence. If you ever want to see Dorothy L. Sayers at her worst, read The Five Red Herrings. It's basically unreadable. But that's not true of Death of a Fool. Like I said, I think Ngaio Marsh does a nice job with her local accents. One of the things about this book that I didn't love so much is that so much of it has to do with the staging of this play and constant reiterations of who was standing in what position on the stage at what time. It just kind of got repetitive to me, and I felt like I wanted to see something more happen. But really, that is the thrust of the investigation: who was where during the performance, which is good police work, but it doesn't make for a fantastically fast-paced or very interesting read. The history of the plays and of the Church of England's tolerance of these plays, that makes for some interesting anthropology and history. But for the reading experience, it can be rather slow. It does end with a reenactment of the crime, a literal reenactment. So instead of Roderick Alleyn calling everybody into a room and saying, okay, here's what happened, they reenact the scene, and Allen then reveals who did it and reveals his logic, and it's all very, very logical and well plotted, and it makes sense. The solution makes sense, and the motivation makes sense. The motivation was there all along, but I just sort of blipped past it myself. So that's what I've got to say about Death of a Fool. I liked it. I didn't love it. I was reminded why Ngaio Marsh isn't someone that I read a lot, even though I do admire her. There was just one other thing that drove me crazy, and it's those really weird English nicknames that you see in English novels. Like, there's this old cranky woman, Aunt Alice, who has this half-wit niece that she lives with, who keeps calling her Aunt Aki. And every single time the niece opens her mouth, she says, Aunt Aki, Aunt Aki, Aunt Aki. It drove me nuts. Mostly because that half-wit niece has no role to play in the book, except maybe comic relief, but she's not comical. She's annoying. You just want her off the page permanently. And then, a man named Simon who's called Simmy Dick. Some of these things just didn't resonate with my 21st century U.S. approach to reading. But I sort of pride myself on being able to read as a contemporary of the readers when the book was written, and so I had to tamp those feelings down. And honestly, that's the fun of reading these books, is just seeing how different things were and how things have evolved and changed or not changed, and so forth. So that's what I've got for you tonight. If there were any major fanboys or fangirls of Ngaio Marsh out there, please leave a comment, tell us why, recommend other books of hers, and I will then see you next time. Thank you and good night.